Way, Hudson IDA. It is now 1:09 p.m. Do we have a full board? Can we take a roll call?
We can. Tiffany Garriga,
Here.
Rebecca Wolf,
Here.
Kamal Johnson,
Present.
Heather Campbell, Heather Campbell. I know she was there. John Cody,
Here.
Richard Wallace,
Here.
Cheryl Kazluga, and I think that was Heather. Heather
Yeah, I
Campbell?
got it. Yep, I'm
Okay,
here.
I
I got
got
kicked out, but I'm back.
You have a quorum, may start the meeting.
Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the minutes for January 19th of 2021?
I'll make that motion.
I was second.
Thank you. May I have a second? That was Rebecca Wolf.
And then Kamal
Second
second.
by the mayor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Moving on to the 2021 mission statement and performance goals. This document states the Hudson IDA mission upcoming year. Hudson IDA's goals are listed as a timely receipt and distribution of the pilot payments and the annual reporting of the job creation and retention numbers as outlined for each of the Hudson IDA projects, which acknowledges that they have read and understood the document and the responses. May I have a motion and a second, please?
I actually wanted to ask a question about the part of that that's about the annual reporting on.
Please state, excuse me.
Mhm.
Okay, excuse me. Please state your name for the record that you want to state a question.
Sure. Rebecca Wolf.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about the part of that statement that talks about annual job retention, or I'm sorry, job creation and the reporting. I just wondered if it would be smart for the IDA to like beef up that statement basically and be more specific about what are the requirements. And I understand that it, can differ from agreement to agreement, but how do we want the reporting to happen and possibly more frequently? And what are the components of the report and things like that? Because it's as we're going along, it seems to me that is, a major significant part of what we're meant to be discussing with developers. And so I just wanted to bring that up for discussion.
Let's talk about it. I mean,
Rebecca, right now, the only project that's reporting jobs is the Hudson Terrace project. And that, I believe, was written into their pilot.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten their report back. I don't right now know where it is. It's in my inbox somewhere, but I have not looked at it yet.
Okay.
But right now, that's all we have. Starting next year, when you do the compliance for 620 Hudson Home or Hudson House, that they would have to follow the same procedure. Whatever's written in their pilot is what I understand it to be. And I'm not very familiar with theirs just yet. So
Okay.
that might be a question for Chris. You can adjust it to whatever you want, but I'm pretty sure it has to follow the pilot agreement.
Okay, and can I just ask, so the WIC does not do any kind of reporting about their job creation or about their hiring practices or anything like that?
The WIC does report to the Columbia County IDA.
Okay.
Okay.
Could we possibly get for our
Just
edification?
for your information, you want the WICs?
Well, yeah, I think it would be useful for us to see how they're reporting and like what are the requirements and things like that.
All of that it's public, and I couldn't tell you where to find it right now.
We can get it for you and send it to you after the meeting.
Great. Okay, I guess that, I mean, if nobody else wants to talk
Any
about
other
it.
questions from the board? Well, I think that it is, all these different agreements are within the pilot of each project. And right now, those are the only ones that we have. What else would you like to have besides a discussion? Like, what do you want specifically that we can vote on the changes or leave it as is and vote as the year goes through to make changes? What would you like to see right now?
Rebecca Wolf, I can imagine it being more frequent reporting for one thing.
I believe it's only required by law once a year. So, and then you have to file it with the authority budget office. But you could certainly build into future closing documents more frequent reporting. But I think that's why you're only seeing on the project that's on the books annually.
Mhm.
Could I ask, has the board
With
reviewed the
the-
pilot annual report, which does have the information on at least Hudson Terrace? Or is there a better way for the board to have an opportunity to review the substance of the report that's used to create that Paris report, perhaps, Michael?
Yeah, I think we could set it up where it's more easier. It's easier to make the make the review and the comparison. But yeah, at this point, the job creation for Hudson Terrace was provided more than 10 years ago, and I don't know that we have access to a ability to show what's happened since over those 10 years. I don't think we have those records, but certainly going forward, we can set up a system that meets the board's reporting requirements or desires.
Yeah, Rebecca Wolf, if I could just explain a little more why this seems like an important subject for the IDA is, I mean, as looking at the mission statement and having now spent a year, deliberating on like our mission to provide incentive and then also to be like rewarded for that incentive with benefits for the residents of the city, that those benefits are supposed to come in the form of jobs. Basically, that's what we're actually charged with doing is, getting like enhancing the employment opportunities for the residents of Hudson. So, so it seems to me that should really be like a major focus of what we're talking about here when we're speaking with developers. And that is all.
And I think it'll be depending on each deal because some job creation might be seasonal and the developer would provide that information on a quarterly basis so that it doesn't look out of whack if we thought it was full-time or, consistent employment throughout the year, depending on the project.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All those things are forward going, and I think as we close on future deals, we can put that on the checklist of things that the board wants to have included in the requirements.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, well, I need a motion and a second, please, for the 2021 mission statement and performance goals.
This is
Can
Heather. I'll make
everyone
that
hear
motion.
me? Thank you. A second, please.
This is John, second.
Thank you, John. All in favor, state aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Moving forward to the 2020 performance measure report. It has been updated. The report has been updated due to the fact that the pilot payments were not paid to the tax, and in conciliation with the treasurer, the following response was inserted as an explanation. The pilot payments were not distributed by December 31st, 2020, due to the effects of COVID-19 on the City of Hudson's treasurer's staff, and the payments were delayed until 2021. All payments has been distributed in January of 2021. If there isn't any discussion, may I have a motion and a second to accept this, please?
So moved. John.
Thank you, John. May I have a second?
I'll second that,
That's
Rebecca.
Richard, I second.
Or-
Thank you. Did you get that, Lisa?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you. Now we have the 2020 committee discharge duties, audit, finance, and governance. May I have a motion and a second?
Rebecca, I'll make a motion.
Kamal, I will second.
Thank you, Kamal and Becca. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you all. Any opposed? Thank you. So we have heard in last month the proposal for the two projects by the Galvin Foundation, one of which is 708 State Street, and the other one is 75 North 7th Street. And to my recollection, they had provided slides and pictures along with their presentation. I hope that the board had some time to think of any questions or comments, or maybe you need more time. But right now, I will move the floor over to Dan and the Galvin Foundation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I have some slides if you'll authorize me to share a screen. Okay, great. Does everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you for having us back to share more about the Depot District project. Today, I am joined again by Victoria Storrs from Camoin 310, as well as Dan Hubble and Robert Gatch from Whiteman, Osterman, Hanna. And today we wanted to provide more detail on our requests and the benefits that Camoin's analysis has found the project provides. And we also wanted to follow up on some of the comments that were raised during our last presentation last month. So to start, we're here because we need financial assistance, and our goal here is to deliver all of the community benefits that the Depot District provides that we discussed during our last presentation. The reason we're applying for 2 separate pilot agreements as opposed to just one is that these are different buildings and they have different financing requirements. 75 North 7th uses public financing sources through New York State and tax credit financing, and as a result, it has its own unique needs. And the same is true for 708 State, which is privately financed, and it has its own separate financial needs in connection with the private financing and bank sources that are going to be used to build that project. So our goal here is we want to deliver this Depot District and all of its benefits, and we want to do so in a way that also yields a strong benefit to city finances, school district, and county finances. So today, Victoria is going to walk through the cost benefit analysis that was produced by Camoin 310, and also break down the unique pilot terms for each project. So at that, I will turn it over to Victoria, and Victoria, just let me know if you want me to change a slide, okay?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, members of the IDA, for inviting us back. Dan, I am seeing.
Yeah, I can't see the slides. The slides are blank.
Very small.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can pull this up.
There,
differently here.
that's
Does it look,
go.
Looks better? Okay.
Yes, okay.
All right.
Thank you. So the Galvin Foundation engaged Camoin 310 to do an economic impact and benefit cost analysis of the 2 buildings, which, as Dan explained, are financed separately, and therefore also requesting different pilots. And to facilitate review by the IDA, once the individual reports were created, I also made a summary consolidated analysis, because the project in many, many ways, including the resident experience, is one project in the district and for the city. So what I will do in talking about the benefits and costs and also the pilots is I will present first and aggregated the impacts of the project on the city, and then individual effects for each of the 2 buildings. To take it up and start off at a slightly higher level, I've spoken to you before about why a benefit cost analysis is performed for a project like this. And there are 2 reasons. One is that New York State requires a benefit cost analysis for all IDA projects. So this is a box that we are checking for you. Another reason that is not a box at all is that it estimates the economic benefits, like the direct jobs at the Depot District or other projects. Because an economic impact analysis has been conducted for each of these, we can also estimate the indirect and induced jobs. And I want to take a moment here to be very clear, because of very good questions that were asked a couple of weeks ago. The project has an estimated number of jobs at these facilities that are responsibility of the project. The economic activity that is anticipated because of the new residents and because of the new commercial space creates additional employment opportunities in the city of Hudson. And that isn't a promise. What the Depot District is doing is making that possible, but they would not be direct employees of the Galvin Foundation and either of these. So this is important for the IDA because, as you were discussing just a couple of minutes ago, projects do make pledges that a certain number of jobs are anticipated to be created. And then separate from that, there are the other economic benefits. And when you've had more time to look through the reports, you can see that we anticipate the new households will be spending, they'll be buying groceries, they'll be buying goods and services within the city of Hudson. And those will support additional jobs at your stores and your retail. And so we call those indirect and induced. And the basic concept is that this project has economic ripple effects, engendering additional economic activity throughout the city, in addition to the promises that it has made with regard to the direct jobs. The other important element that I'll touch on briefly is estimating the costs. So we do the benefit cost ratio, the new fiscal effects, the new tax revenues anticipated to be generated, and the costs, what the City of Hudson IDA is being asked to forego so that this project does get built. We'll move down to the next slide and talk about the results. The consolidated impact, which is both of the buildings together, is over $38 million invested in the City of Hudson, creating space for new businesses to make their own additional investments. 3 new direct full-time jobs are anticipated to run the actual project. And then there's the ongoing economic activity from 133 households that are either new to the city or are retained, and these are largely the affordable units, retained because otherwise there is such a demand for those units that the households would have to seek housing elsewhere. And 30 direct construction jobs. That's during the temporary construction period. So this is the investment, the economic activity. In addition, there's the fiscal activity. What is actually going to come into the budget for the City of Hudson, and particularly for the school district? The economic impact, the additional sales, the resident spending is anticipated to generate over $108,000 in new sales taxes on a present value basis over the life of the project. A much smaller amount of new sales taxes during construction. And this is as the workers spend their earnings in the City of Hudson. This is, you are asked to exempt construction materials, but the workers are going to be coming in and they'll be visiting your local businesses during their regular work hours. The big numbers are 3.9 million in net new residential real property taxes over 30 years. This is tax revenue that will not be received by the city and the school district if these projects are not built. And over 400,000 in new commercial real property tax revenues, because this is mixed use. It's not just a housing project. So those are the additional revenues anticipated for the City of Hudson and the school district. The total costs of the financial assistance take the form of foregone revenues, money that if the project were built and you didn't assist it, you would be getting additional revenue. But as we discussed throughout the process, without the assistant, the project is unfeasible and the Galvin Foundation won't be able to make the investment in the buildings. But to show as a comparison and to satisfy the need for a benefit cost analysis, we do show a what if. So in terms of what the city is foregoing compared to a hypothetical project is just under $5.5 million in real property taxes over 30 years. That's to the city and to the school. A little over $51,000 in sales tax on construction materials, and a portion of the mortgage tax that the county collects and shares with the city. So we show this as a benefit to cost. So the taller of the green columns is the additional tax revenue and other revenues that will be received as a result of the project. And then to the right, the shorter column is the foregone revenue. So the benefits very visually demonstrate that the city is receiving more than it is foregoing to make the project happen. We'll take a look at 75 North 7th. This is the affordable piece. This is over $22.5 million invested, 76 new or retained households because of the strong demand for affordable housing, direct construction jobs. This is the same data. The new sales taxes, the new residential real property taxes that would not otherwise be collected, and the new commercial real property taxes for the commercial portion within the building. And then the total cost to the financial assistance. And very quickly and visually, again, we are seeing that the benefits to the city exceed the benefits to the project. And that's where you want to be in terms of evaluating a project. 708 State Street, we have over $16 million invested. 57 households will either be new to the city or households that would otherwise have left the city because of the demand for housing, which is recognized within the city. Like the Consolidated and the 75 North, there's new sales taxes generated over, we show 25 years because it's a shorter pilot. As the households spend their earnings, visit businesses, and the economic activity of the new households ripples through the city economy, the new residential real property taxes collected, even with the pilot reduction, and new commercial property tax revenues as a result of the commercial space, and lower costs of financial assistance. So the benefit to cost ratio, even for 708 State, is $2 of direct fiscal benefits to the city and the school are estimated for every $1 of financial assistance requested. So the next slide summarizes these. For the whole project combined, the benefit to cost is $1.87 in fiscal benefits to the city for every $1 of financial assistance requested. Columbia County itself also receives benefits because some of the economic activity does occur within Columbia County, but not within the city of Hudson. Now, when you are asked to review and approve a financial assistance package, the sales tax on construction materials, you're asked to provide an exemption, and that reduces the cost to the project, and that's an important component. Also the mortgage recording tax component, but the most valuable piece of assistance that you're asked to review and approve is a payment in lieu of taxes, because the real property taxes are a major cost for the project. And because of the different financing packages and the different role of the two buildings, the Galvin Foundation has asked me to structure two different proposed pilot agreements for your review. So I'll take you through what these are. I know that you're familiar, but it will bring everyone onto the same page this afternoon. 75 North 7th is an affordable housing building. The financing package overall for this, which is not uncommon for affordable housing financing packages in New York State, is a 30-year financing term. So we have created a pilot that aligns with the other financing and typical low-income housing tax credits and other participants. The pilot is based on the shelter rent. It's a percentage of the rent paid by the tenants. And this is a method of creating a pilot that the city has used before for Hudson Terrace. And it's based on the ability of the residents to pay for shelter. Using the shelter rent method does help the project be financially feasible and yet enable the units to be affordable. So compared with a project that is not receiving a tax abatement of any kind, The affordable portion at 75 North 7th is paying approximately 32% of the taxes that would otherwise be due. And that's the amount is set to help win competitive state funding. And Dan, if you want to jump in here very briefly to explain about that.
Yeah, to provide additional context, we used the Hudson Terrace project as a starting point for two reasons. One of them is that is the only other example of a Hudson IDA approved pilot for an affordable housing development. So we're proposing terms that are identical to the shelter rent standard in the Hudson Terrace project. The other reason is, you'll notice that the amount of pilot payments per unit is lower than what we had proposed in previous discussions with the Common Council when we were discussing the 75 North 7th project last year. Part of the reason for that is, as many of you know, state funding sources have become increasingly competitive. And we know that there's an urgent need for these affordable units in the city of Hudson. So we want to put our best foot forward when we apply for state funding and give ourselves the best chance of winning the award needed to move forward with the project. So that's one of the motivations here. And we wanted to establish both fairness by linking this to the way that the Hudson Terrace project is treated, but we also want to ensure competitiveness so that we can deliver this project as soon as possible since the need is so urgent.
Thank you. The actual terms, the requested payments are detailed in the report. They do not look good on PowerPoint. So I hope that all of you, if you don't have it in front of you, have access to the report at least quickly after this meeting and can double check. So what you'll see with North 7th, 30 years, consistent 32% of taxes otherwise due over time to support the affordable units and keep them affordable. For 708 State Street, the units are market rate, and therefore the ask for the pilot is a little bit less. It's a 25-year term. It doesn't have the same constraints on the financing package as 75 North 7th. It's aligned with the bank financing. Banks like stability. That's the simplest thing to say. They want to know that the project is going to have stable revenues and repay the debt service over time. Unlike the pilot requested for the affordable piece, 708 State Street requested pilot will increase the payments over time so that by the end of the term, the project is paying full taxes in year 26. And we do this by focusing the tax reduction in the early years when it's most needed to get the building up and running, to get tenants in, to stabilize the project. And so taxes are asked to be reduced by 75% just for the first 10 years. And then each year the project will pay more taxes. By year 25, it's only a 5% reduction. And what that means, using a little bit of math, is that 95% of taxes otherwise due would be paid in year 25. And that's an estimate because we don't actually know. But what's the important takeaway here is it's a shorter term. Taxes will grow over time so that the community is receiving more benefit with each year that goes by. And the final piece of information that is very important about the way the pilot requests are structured is that there are commercial spaces in both buildings. And it is not intended that the commercial spaces benefit from the pilots. The Galvin Foundation anticipates that the share of taxes owed by commercial spaces would be paid.
Great. So I think that wraps up Victoria's section here. Our next speaker is Dan Hubble, who's just going to talk a little bit about job creation and local hiring in response to some of the comments and discussion at the last IDA meeting. So at that, I'll change the slide and turn it over to Dan Hubble.
Before Dan Hubble goes on, does anyone have any questions for Victoria?
Yeah, this is Heather. I have a question. When you're looking at the
Yeah, thank
economic
you.
impact and the fiscal benefits
Thank you.
specific to the city, I'm wondering how you get to that number because given the fact that we share a zip code with other surrounding areas, I'm wondering how you can be specific to the city of Hudson versus say the zip code.
Where the zip code bleed over, if you will, is the most significant is when we are estimating the economic ripple effects. What is the study area in which the activity occurs? And it's an excellent question. It's something that is someone who does impact analysis all the time. I try to answer, but you asked it very, very well. We, for this, did not use the zip codes. What we did was analyze the effects on Columbia County as a whole. And then we did an additional demographic and retail use analysis using census data to determine how much economic activity in Columbia County is also occurring within the city of Hudson. And that's by census tract. And we estimated that on the whole, approximately 20% of retail and other economic activity that occurs within Columbia County occurs within the city of Hudson. We checked that a couple of different ways. And then we ran the analysis on the county and allocated 20% of the induced and indirect jobs, of the household spending, and those other economic effects for the city. And for the sales tax generated, we used the 13% because we did have a hard number for that. So once we calculated the sales tax that would be collected by Columbia County as a result of activity, we allocated 13% of that as a fiscal effect to the city of Hudson. So I'm going to stop there and ask if I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Can I just sort of follow up on that same question, because I was wondering the same thing, but in a different
Say
way.
your name, please.
Oh, Rebecca Wolf. So, you know, one of the issues of Hudson is that there is very little groceries available in the city of Hudson, for example. So, so when you talk about, you know, household spending, food would be a major aspect of that, I imagine. And currently there's only one very small grocery option in the city of Hudson. So I wonder how you factor that into the analysis. And then just, you know, the same could basically be said for most amenities or like sort of what I would consider normal needs of a household. The city has very few, you know, standard retail operations. A large part of what is sold in the city of Hudson is like geared towards visitors generally. So I'm curious how that could be analyzed.
Our typical analysis at Des Moines 310, and we conducted that here, and the breakdown is in the written report. Forgive me for saying that, it sounds very flip. The first thing that we do, so I talked about how we figured out how much of the activity within the county is occurring within the city of Hudson, and that is a good number. The economic activity that is occurring within the city of Hudson is measured and reported to the US Census Bureau, and that's the data that we access. Mm-hmm. With respect to where a household is buying its groceries, that is actually a very important question. And I think one of the long-term effects that we hope would come from this project is that there would be a critical mass of residents to support a private investment in more food and groceries. That would be a terrific outcome for the city. So what we do is we carve back that 20% a little bit further to, I'm looking at a number here. We make an estimate of how much of a household's annual spending basket is going to occur within the community anyway. So here, we first carved back based on Hudson 20%. And then we made another estimate of how much, a slightly lower estimate of how much activity would actually occur within the jurisdiction, within the community that a resident is living, versus what they might purchase on their way home from work, or while visiting relatives, or when they leave the community overall. And I don't want to quote those numbers directly, because it will feel like it's off the top of my head, but we do carve them back both ways to get to a very conservative number based on the offerings that are available versus household demand and the economic activity within the city.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, we try very hard to be conservative about this and not to overpromise in any way.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the?
Rebecca Wolf, I just have one more question. I just wondered if somebody could explain a little bit more in depth the shelter rent method, what that means. I'm sorry if I just missed how it was explained.
Victoria, you want to take a stab at it? We basically pulled the language directly from the Hudson Terrace Agreement, and it's a calculation based on, I think, rents minus utilities. Is that right, Victoria?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, so the value of the rent, and then it's 10% of that value per unit aggregated up to a total payment. And this is adopted by other IDAs and also elsewhere in the country. It's a federal concept as well as a state one.
Okay.
Thank you. If there isn't anything else, I guess Mr. Hubble can proceed.
Sure. So in terms of, thanks again so much for having us here and allowing us to present today. As Victoria hit on, in terms of job creation, there are three direct jobs which this project will be responsible for. It's split between the two projects. So we did 1.5 FTE jobs per application for a total of 3. To reiterate what Victoria said, there's a lot of indirect activity that will happen, and hopefully we'll see job creation spur as a result of this. But those jobs, which are referred to in the Comoin report and not in the application, are jobs from ancillary businesses, whether they're coming in to one of the commercial units, and so we're seeing a new business come in or an existing business come in that's going to be hiring people, or whether we're going to see bleed over into new jobs and other businesses within the area. Again, the goal of these two projects is to really shape and define a new commercial district, with commercial residential district within the city of Hudson. In terms of hiring practices, we're happy to comply with whatever the applicable IDA policies are for those hiring practices. And the same would also go for our residential tenancies, looking at what your policies are and making sure that what we do comply with those policies.
Great, thank you, Dan. Next, I would like to touch on a question that came up at the last IDA meeting, which was about whether we could change the income distribution of the two buildings and spread the affordable units across both buildings rather than having all of them at 75 North 7th. So immediately following that discussion, I reached out to the public financing expert who helps us put together the financial models for these projects. And he advised that it would have an impact on the numbers. Namely, it would really limit our ability to pay much of anything for a pilot payment, because it's just a harder project to finance when you have that many market rate units as part of a publicly financed project. In addition, it would require us to ask the state for a lot more assistance. We would be increasing our subsidy ask to the state. Under normal times, that might be something we'd be more open to, but as I noted at the beginning, state resources are extremely competitive right now. So in order to win, you want to show the state that you're creating a lot of units and not asking for a lot of money. So the concern there is, we want to maximize the tax payments to the city of Hudson to support the fiscal impact of this project. And also we want to win when we go to the state for financing, because if we don't, that's another 6 to 8 months we have to wait before we can go back to them. And, we want to get this project moving as soon as possible. And I know, many folks in the city want to see affordable housing as soon as possible. So what we wanted to look at is how can we address the concern that was stated that there would be a problematic dynamic between the two buildings. And, really our goal with this project is to have 2 buildings, but 1 community. So there are a lot of concrete commitments we want to make and share with you to show that this will feel like 1 community. So the first is that these buildings have equal amenities. Both buildings have a fitness room, a community room, tenant storage space, bike storage room, and a laundry room, and outdoor green space. So both of these are really amenity-rich environments, and the buildings are, in that sense, of equal quality. In addition, I know some folks have noted that the proposed green space amenities for the building are a little different. One, we're looking at maybe having a pool. The other is more focused on kind of community gardening, outdoor recreation space. So our commitment is that the residents of both buildings will be able to use the outdoor green spaces at both buildings. We have a pool at 708 State. All the residents of 75 North 7th can use that pool. If we have an outdoor grilling area or a community gardening area at 75 North 7th, the residents at 708 State will be able to take part in the community gardening. So we think that sends an important message. And on top of that, we also want to really proactively build a community between residents through our staffing. So that involves cultural competency training for our building staff, so that they're comfortable with diversity and they know how to embrace tenants from diverse backgrounds. It also involves bringing our Galvin housing counseling staff support into the building to help create community, build community, and perhaps in some cases mediate any issues that could come up between neighbors and residents. And then finally, we're going to have these beautiful community rooms in both buildings and outdoor green spaces, and we want to partner with the Community Advisory Board to bring community organizations into the building, bring community events into the building, and create opportunities where residents of both buildings can connect with some of the great organizations that exist in the city of Hudson. So our goal is to really proactively create a single community, not just through training, but also through our commitments to provide equal access to amenities for the residents. The other piece of feedback that we heard from the IDA was a desire to see more affordable 3-bedroom units. So we went back to look at the numbers, and we were able to triple the number of 40% and 50% AMI units, as you see in this chart. And we did so by allocating 3 bedrooms that were previously moderate income and market rates into the low income categories of 40% and 50% of AMI. So, we're really showing here that we value that input, and I think that it's a stronger project with these changes. So I thank the board for encouraging us to take another look at the income distribution. And at that, that concludes our presentation, and we welcome additional questions. I can stop sharing my screen if that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for your updated presentation. The changes sound great, and I will open up the floor for any questions or comments from the board before we move on to any public comments. Any board members, if you do have a comment or a question, please state your name first.
This is Richard Wallace. I have a question.
Yes.
In the mixed use plan that you described or that you used to put the project together, it involves residential and retail. Is there any provision for, what I'm thinking of is something in addition to just retail and apartment space, something more sort of maybe commercial? In other words, I don't know, other than retail businesses, will there be commercial space for that sort of thing? You know, there's a lot of startups, for instance, looking for spaces around Hudson. I just wonder whether that factored at all into your mixed use model. That's really my question.
That's a great question. And while we think that retail and restaurant type uses are the most likely in this building, we're not necessarily wedded to only having those uses. I've heard folks talk about wanting to have co-working space, for instance, potentially in one of the buildings. So I think we're open to other uses that benefit the residents of the building and also the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay, that's great to hear, because you'll find that there's a very large and kind of mixed bag of usages that people are interested in. So I was interested in how you are going to partition the space and what might or might not be available to people in that category. So thank you for your response.
Great.
Thank you, Richard. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Are there any public comments or questions from the public? Well, I'm going to ask again. Are there any questions from the board or any questions from the public?
I have a question. Sorry, my computer is not letting me raise my hand. Hello.
Please state your name.
My name is Aaliyah Schneider. I'm the Hudson reporter for the local paper, the Register Star. I had a couple questions just to clarify. One is for Victoria, and I was wondering if you could just clarify how economic activity in the area is measured, if that's like how much is bought at stores here, or if that's specifically what residents buy. I just want to make sure I understand that. And my other question was for Dan, and I was wondering if basically how it will be decided who gets to live in this housing, if it's very competitive, and how, if there's going to be an application process, how that will work and who will be prioritized.
Victoria, I'll let you go first.
Well, first I want to ask Madam Chair if you would like us to answer these directly or do it through you.
You can answer directly.
Okay, thank you. That's a matter of protocol. The economic activity is measured as jobs created to support household spending or spending by the project. So a resident has to buy a certain basket of goods and services to support that household, using what's known as the Economic Modeling Specialists, Inc. software, which is a nationally recognized input-output software. We say the project is going to have this many residents at this much income with this spending basket, and it creates an algorithm to say it would support, you know, this many people working at a coffee shop and this many people working at a doctor's office, who then spend their earnings. And if, I believe the report could be made available. I would reach out to the IDA. And our analysis for calculating the direct, indirect, and induced impacts as that economic activity creates jobs, which then create earnings, and then creates additional sales or spending, is detailed in that report. All three measures are there: additional jobs, additional earnings that get spent, and sales of goods and services as a result.
Can I ask a follow-up just to clarify?
Yes.
Sure.
I was wondering, when you were talking about the 20% of economic activity happening in Hudson, just what that meant. Is that the same thing?
It's certainly related, absolutely. We use a data source called Esri, which is a geographic, a mix of geographic and economic activity. They take data from the Census, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they measure the economic activity right down to the census tract level throughout the United States. So when I say that 20% of the economic activity within the county is occurring within the city of Hudson, they have measured and said it's X million dollars of clothing is purchased here versus within the county. And those are the numbers that we use. It goes down to clothing, construction materials, healthcare services, purchases at drugstores. All of that spending does go down to a very fine-grained level.
Good. So to your second question, Aaliyah,
Thank you,
the
Dan.
project, oh, sorry, Tiffany, you were saying?
No, it's on you.
Okay. So the project will have a lottery system. And as part of having the public financing, we have certain requirements from the state, which we're going to follow. The availability of the units has to be marketed, has to be promoted, and we're going to be working with a community advisory board, which we've committed to help get the word out and make sure that everybody not only knows that this opportunity is there to get one of these units, but also if they need assistance with applications, that they know where to find it. We have also, in the past, we've committed to a priority for Hudson residents, which Dan Hubble, can you help kind of introduce that concept, or Rob?
So in terms of prioritization of tenancies, you know, ultimately in terms of the affordable units, that's going to depend upon sign off by the state. And so with state funding comes state guidelines. And so what we do is going to be conditioned upon state's approval of that. To the extent that the IDA has policies with regards to residential projects and prioritization of tenancies, you know, we're happy to look at them and implement them, you know, provided that the state signs off on those as well. And so, you know, when we start talking about the idea of prioritization, you know, we're happy to implement those policies that the public agencies from which we're getting support wants us to implement. Beyond that, you know, you get into a slippery slope when you start talking about who can live here and who can't live here. And so, you know, we'll continue to talk with IDA staff and with IDA legal counsel, as well as with state counsel on how those policies develop.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the public? If there aren't any other questions from the public or from the board, I am asking for a motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry, I got a question. I'm sorry, I was on mute.
That's fine. State your name, please.
Dominic Moranci. I got a couple questions. So in terms of employment, Dan, for the contracts and everything, is that going to be prevailing wage? And also in terms of apartments in both complexes, how many are going to be earmarked for ADA, in both sites?
Sure. So for the first piece of that, I want to kick it over to Dan Hubble so he can break down some of the state requirements that come with using public financing. And then I'll be happy to answer the ADA question.
Sure. So in terms of prevailing wage, there are going to be certain requirements under the state funding as well as the IDA funding, in which in some cases we would likely need to be pay prevailing wage. The law was passed, the law was amended here recently. The prevailing wage law is amended recently to include that requirement for IDA projects. So that's something that's on our radar, and that we'll work out with the IDA Council and State Council as we move through the project.
Thank you.
Great. And for accessibility, I'm just pulling up the numbers here. At least 10% of the apartments will be move-in ready for individuals with mobility impairment, and 4% of those units will be move-in ready for people with hearing or vision impairment. And this essentially, these numbers are based on achieving the highest competitive standard that New York State Homes and Community Renewal sets for these types of projects. So this is, more than the minimum.
So one follow-up question, please. So with those numbers, 10% and 4%, does the parking, ADA parking, also have the same compliance? So, is going to be 10% parking available for handicap accessible vehicles, et cetera?
I'm going to jump in here. So that's more a question that would be through in the planning board process than the IDA here. And so I would like to try to limit, Madam Chairman, if it's okay, I'd try to limit the discussion here to what is relevant to the IDA and not so much as to the issues that would properly be before the planning board and not the IDA board.
I don't have a problem with that. I think
And we're certainly, I'm sorry, Madam
Just-
Chairman. We're certainly happy to answer that question through
just
the
to make
context.
sure.
We're certainly happy to answer that question through the context of the public hearing
Don't
process
understand.
in front of the. We're certainly happy to answer that question through the public hearing process and the public comment process with the City of Hudson Planning Board. But I think questions in regards to number of parking spaces and stuff like that is better reserved for that discussion than necessarily before the IDA board, respectfully.
Just for the purposes, because the public is listening, that question does get addressed during that next meeting. And also Dan Kent and his team through email as well, as your position as an elected official and your ward. With that being said, are there any other questions from the public? If there aren't any other questions, motion to adjourn, please. It is 2:13 p.m.
I so move.
I'll second it, Rebecca Wolf.
And who so moves, please?
That was Richard.
Thank you, Richard. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the meeting is now adjourned if no one opposes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.